We'd like to welcome you to the YouTube channel, The Wildernesses at Lake Clark, Alaska.
If you've ever wanted to build a remote cabin, wanted to live off-grid, or just interested in what it takes to do that, then this channel's for you. This is the story of our family, the Nesses, following our dreams and having a vision for the future of living and building a lodge in the bush of Alaska, and sharing these experiences with friends and family. On this channel, we'll be sharing the daily life, the stories, and how to get things done at the Wilderness Pro Lodge. So join us and follow along on this journey.
This was 2003, or it actually started prior to that, and a friend of ours up in Alaska, he would come down to Idaho, and I was probably 12 or 13 or something like that, watching videos of Alaska, and there's a lot of people that have a vision to go to Alaska, but really it wasn't even on my radar.
So in 2003, Micah got invited to do an apprenticeship at the guide up there, a neighbor of ours, when he was 16 years old. So at 16, he went up there and for the next 3 years did the guideship and got the apprenticeship, got a full guide license. And in 2006, Micah and I bought the land. And then in 2007 of July, after all the planning, we were ready to break ground.
So after that year in 2007, the progression and what happened up there really began to take form, because after that year, we started having lots of our family up there. We actually didn't have our whole family up at one time until just this year. 2019 was actually the first year we had all of our family up there, plus, you know, the oldest two, their husbands came along as well, and also the grandkids got to experience. So that was quite the big culmination. But even before that, we started having, you know, different friends and people coming up to work and help and build. It was really we had a lot of hands to put together to help make it happen, because we did it over time, and we were living in it at the same time.
And that's a key, and a lot of times we have a dream and a vision. We can't accomplish that at just one time, typically. So what we did over the last 13 years is we started, and we've been working on this for 13 years. So it's a key is to have a vision, a dream for what you want to do, but then you need to stick with it. And so we kept, but we wanted to have the whole, you know, part of the family, if not all the family, involved in this from the beginning. So we did it as we went along. So we just had we built the platform and did the foundation platform there in July. In the fall, Micah and another friend put the shell on the building, and then the next spring, now we started construction within the building. And no running water, no electricity, none of that stuff. And so, but my wife came along, and our outhouse was a log in the bush, okay? Now for you gals, that's a pretty big deal to start out that way. But, and I said you didn't have to do that, but we did. And then the progression of getting all the pieces put together with that. But we started and had, our daughters were up there with us, so we started using it right away. It wasn't perfect, but it worked. So we could enjoy the adventure of a lifetime in the bush while we were building this building.
It was amazing to see also how quickly those things have changed. You know, one week we're using you know, plastic and stuff on the walls to basically make barriers for rooms, and then we were sleeping in a tent outside. And then you see the progression very quickly, because all of a sudden now you have sheeting on the walls, and then, you know, you're able to get electrical run, and you start having outlets and plugging into a generator, and you start hooking up a few, you know, water things, and, you know, running. We had a little outside shower with a pallet on the ground with a little pump. You heat up a bucket of water and turn on the pump and pump up water for a shower. And then thankfully we did have one of our neighbors, a seasonal that comes up from the lower 48, and we ran hose connected to hose to connected to hose all the way over to them to run a little bit of power when we had the generator going, and just to have a little bit of water. And then we set up a pump in the lake, which actually we used for quite a while.
Quite a few years, because that's a glacier-fed lake. Lake Clark is 60 miles long and 4 or 5 miles wide and up to 1,000 feet deep. And glacier-fed, so we were drinking the water out of the lake. It was good. and we had the wash machine sitting on the beach. So you do what you have to do till you don't have to. And but that was part of the progression, and we'll be sharing some of this over a period of time, how these pieces came together, which is sometimes kind of comical. But again, my hat's off to my wife. She loved to do that, and but the goal is to have comfortable place to live with hot and cold running water and this type of thing. So
and some heat is good too. And we got a stove in there and got you know, chopping wood for that too. And I mean, everything you have to, you know, go and get it or order it in, and it takes a long time. I mean, when we brought in the original materials, all that stuff came in on a plane, and that process has to start months in advance because you're getting the list and checking it twice and 3 times and over again, because once it goes on that plane, it's shipped out, and then it has to be staged in Anchorage, and then you load it up onto the plane, and then it lands in the town. Hopefully, if it gets on schedule and the weather's not bad, they unload it. They thankfully have larger equipment over in the small town, which is across the lake from our place, about 4 miles over water. So it lands in the town, you unload it, stage it on the beach, load it back onto either a boat or a barge, take it across the lake. Hopefully the lake is good and calm, you can bring it across. You unload it by hand because we don't have the heavy machinery over there. Even, I mean, from eye joists that are, you know, 26 foot long, and you're hauling them across by, you know, hand and bringing them up the beach. And thankfully had a 4-wheeler with a trailer that still was able to move stuff around.
It's quite a journey, and it was educational for us. I had a business down in Idaho, a restoration company, and my boys actually ran that for a while, so they learned some of the basic work skills and work ethics and habits that saw them through working up there. And because everything is very, very difficult to do, but it's really exciting, you know, everything you got to do in a boat or something like that. And again, we didn't have a phone service at that time or satellite or anything like that. So logistics are just unbelievable what you got to go through, and we'll be sharing a lot of this journey over a period of time.
It's a very unique community of the town of Port Allsworth across the lake from us, and a lot of people were there to support along the way, really good friends that became almost like family as well. And you really become connected, and yet at the same time you're disconnected because you're away from the hustle and everything of a normal town, and you have, you know, seasonal people that come and go across the lake for lodges and those kinds of things. And you know, being a part of that you know, community was a big part of it too. You know, there's a really active church and a camp that all of the young kids from the area come into every summer, and there's a lot of positive things that come out of this area. So it's just a lot of different aspects that drew us to be there and be a part of that.
And that little town, that's a town, but that's a town where everything has to be flown into. So it's not a town like you think your neighborhood.
There's no store shelves that you can go buy stuff.
You can't buy anything there, but some guys have gas, so we can buy gas and gasoline and propane and fuel there. But there's no grocery store there. So it's a whole different world there, and then we're a whole world separate from them, which literally you can't drive to it. You got to take a boat, and hopefully the weather is calm, which you'll see in some of the videos. Gets pretty rough. You can't go any place.
Calm. We've had 6-7 foot waves out there, and it's
and you'll see some pretty interesting stuff hauling things across the lake in those conditions. But so we're actually a world away from a world, and even Port Allsworth is away from the whole world. It's a bush town, and so it's a different perception, and everything that you do, you have to get it figured out how to get it there. So this is about a foot thick, and you're going to see the process of this tundra I'm standing on. It's spongy, and so we got to cut through this. And the old way we did it before we knew this way was we'd use an adze or an axe and chop all the way through. Then I came up with a way using a chainsaw, which really speeds everything up. You'll ruin a chainsaw blade, but you'll cut your day in half of less than half, 1/4 the time it takes to do it with an axe. We're going to cut this tundra out of here, and you'll see the process of that. And I'll do it right now to show you how we cut through it in squares. Okay, so that shows how deep you cut with this. That's how deep the tundra is. Now I'm right down on dirt, and that's the permafrost. I'm down on top of the permafrost, so we're going down to the permafrost, and this should be, some of this should be frozen underneath here. It's the early August, and the ground is still frozen a foot and a half down. It'll be frozen about a foot thick. But this is the process to cut it up, and then when you start removing it, you grab a hold of it and you start pulling it back, just like you do sod. That's the easy way to do it. Been out log hunting, and I got the log for the dock that I was wanting, so we're gonna get this harvested right away, and this will be over the top of the dock. So we got the log trimmed up, all of the branches off of it, cut to length, and then tied alongside the boat here so we can make headway. And it's worked out pretty good. Just how you got to do things in the bush when you don't have everything that you really sometimes need. You make it work though. Now that's the way to fly. So this is the basic workshop. This area here with the logs, as well as back behind us here, where we prep the logs as well, sanding and debarking them. All the prep work it takes to do the prepping of these logs to get them to be used. This is the whole area up and down the road or the city. Quite a large thing up here is when we pick up logs and throughout the lake on the beaches and floating. They in the spring when the water flushes out, the flooding out of all these different places, they end up in the lake, and we go find them and harvest them, and that's a lot of the logs. 2/3 of the logs we've used in the property come out of the lake.
Bird.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Cabin about 15 miles up the lake, and had not really been able to get it finished, and so I was able to buy it from him and dismantle that and be able to float it down the lake. We always either have a gun on us or a gun close by because we're in the middle of grizzly country. There are hundreds of grizzlies and brown bears around there, as well as black bears. And we've never had any troubles, but you just never know when you're going to run into them, and you want to always be ready because things can happen. So learn how to dance.
big piece of wood. Well, once we get the demolition done and the dismantling of the log cabin, then we bring it to the beach and make flotillas out of it. Made 3 different flotillas, and then we pulled it by a boat. It took about 12 hours each trip to bring down to Wilderness Pro Lodge, where we'd store it on the beaches there till we could start processing the logs. Okay, so that literally took me 5 minutes, less than 5 minutes, about 4 or 5 minutes to cut that whole log. And cut pretty straight, about as straight as I'd do with a Alaska chainsaw mill, but only 3 times faster, 4 times faster. So it works out pretty good. I just have about another 25 logs to cut like this. So we'll be doing the rest of these here as we go along. We get to see a lot of wildlife here. This happened to be a moose cow with a calf. Maybe it had twins earlier that day, and a bear may have taken it. They usually have twins, but the bears take almost half the calves up here. Well, 3 years ago, we started on the addition onto the main lodge that we originally built, and using logs from the log cabin, timber frame. All this is done by hand. You see, we're using pulleys, and we put pulleys up in trees around there and get it all set in place by hand. There's never been a backhoe or excavator or anything on this part of the property, and everything's been done by hand with a generator and a 4-wheeler and just a lot of labor. But it's a lot of fun putting the structure up, and that's the frame that would hold the rest of it structure together there as we built up and did the dining hall and a bedroom and a utility room there facing the lake. And had some guys that were helping me, had young guys, had apprentices. We have young apprentices that help every year with this, and really, really helpful. And we got a lot done, and just a fun environment to work in. You never know if it's going to rain for a month straight, though. So for the interior of the addition there, and the ceiling and the walls, we used a lot of leftover logs and the pre-cut lumber cut with a chainsaw from the log cabin that we used. He was going to use some of this for his interior and his roof, but we ended up using that for a lot of the finish work inside the addition here. All the countertops and tables and floors in the dining hall and the countertops in the kitchen all came out of the floor decking from the log cabin that we demoed. They were cut all with a chainsaw mill by hand.
Last year we built a wood-burning hot tub right next to where we had our sauna built about 5 years ago. We used a 1,000-gallon fuel barrel and cleaned it up, fixed it up, sealed it, then used a wood-burning snorkel stove to heat the wood-burning hot tub with it. Beautiful setting to have a hot tub set up in, and very, very comfortable. So building a little log cabin this last summer, we used a lot of logs left over from the big log cabin that we demoed up the lake, but also we harvested a lot of logs. So there's about 120 to 150 logs it takes to build a log cabin like this. And these logs here are laid out, the platform is laid out on top of rocks. Instead of using cement, we used rocks sit underneath the permafrost on gravel, and then we build our structure on top of that. And as you notch them in, kind of like the old-fashioned, mountain men used to do, building out of that. It is really a fun thing to do, working with the different types of wood. This is all white spruce, typically. Some of the real curled ones are black spruce with the burls and the twists and bows in them. But we used a lot of white spruce also. But this will be a one-bedroom little cabin that we'll use as time goes on here.